Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I will be doing a book review of Harold Schechter's latest book, and that is 50 States of Murder, an Atlas of American Crime. This is a book that I think a lot of people would really like because, and I'll just get right to my top point of this review. It touches upon a little bit of everything. So within each state, he covers several cases. So each case is about 1.5 to 2 pages. So with that being said, the reader gets a little bit of several different cases from each state so that if they want to do a little bit more of a deep dive, they're able to do so. Or if they don't want to do a deep dive and they just want to get maybe like 150 different cases just to know a little bit about each, then this book accomplishes that. And I think that's really, really cool for a true crime reader who really just wants to absorb as many cases as possible and not necessarily get into like the nitty gritty of each case, because some of the cases discussed in this book can be a little bit much. Some of them I was familiar with, so I will get into that. And I do see James Watson, 50 States. This is going to be a long show. No, I will not be reviewing each case from each state because, yeah, that would be like a 20-hour episode. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I do my typical true crime book reviews, because this is that type of different book than I typically do. But y'all know, if you have been a longtime viewer of this show, y'all know Harold Schechter. I have been obsessed with Harold Schechter's work for decades. And I was very fortunate and honored enough, maybe now, what's it, 1.5 or 2 years ago at this point, to have him on the show for an interview. So I've been quite a fan of his work. I own all of Harold Schechter's books. All of them. So, of course, when this book came out, it was in my Amazon cart on pre-order, ready to go. So before I dive into that, quick hello, and yeah, we will get going. Tony Stewart, hi Danny, I should be here later. You are always early, Tony Stewart. Absolutely love it. James Watson, I already acknowledged you. You're fine. Let's creepy music. Yeah, you can thank the music here for Paulcast, Paul from Paulcast for doing that. So as always, if anybody is new to the show, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like the video. If you have read this book and if you have any comments or takeaways from it, by all means, please leave a comment. I would love to engage about that. Or maybe if you've read any of Harold Schechter's other works, definitely let me know, because again, big Harold Schechter fan. All of my social media information is in the drop down bar below: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the merch store, Cameo, buy me a coffee, all of that stuff is down below. So make sure to check that out. Lastly, because we are talking about books tonight, If you want to still get your vote in for February's book club, you still have a couple more days to do that. So there is a poll with 3 book choices. So definitely make sure to do that so we can get a book on the docket for the end of the month. And I'm really excited for that. So Danny, you forgot Karen. No way. Did I scroll by? Oh my gosh, I did. Oh, my apologies, Karen Diamond. I hope you are well. I hope you are well. Good to see you. And sorry about that. Thank you, Tony. I don't know how I did that. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive on in. So this book, 50 States of Murder, I will go ahead and read the back for you so you have a little bit of insight into what the book is described as. So it says state bird, state flower, state killer. Here from the true crime master Harold Schechter comes a compulsively readable atlas of America's homicidal history, fascinatingly organized state by state. From Alabama, where grisly serial killer Raymond Eugene Brown started his deluge of violence by butchering his own great-grandmother, to Wyoming, home of the murderous Earl Durland, the Tarzan of Tatons. And I probably mispronounced that. 50 States of Murder captures the sordid, gruesome, and often little reported stories of local crimes that slip into legend, complemented by stunning visuals and driving no details spared narrative storytelling. Skipping past the notorious cases that are almost too well known, Schechter creates a more nuanced and titillating portrait of crime in America. It's a perfect treat for the morbidly curious. I will say that is absolutely spot on. With that being said, the part where it says often little reported stories of local crimes, that is a bit more of what the author goes into describing versus more well-known cases. So take that little part that is on the back of the book, and I'm going to head and read a little bit of a part of the introduction, which will explain that a little bit more, because then I feel that gives the reader a bit more of an accurate viewpoint into kind of why Harold Schechter is choosing the cases that he does in this book. So I feel like, again, the back cover gives you a little bit of that. And then once you get to the introduction, you're like, okay, now I see why the author is making these creative choices in this latest novel. So I'm going to go ahead and quote. For the most part, cases like these form the subject of this book. When I do deal with killers who have become notorious household names, I focus on their lesser-known homicides. Example, Andrew Cunanan's slaying of Gianni Versace in Miami. So not of that, but of 2 intimate friends in Minnesota. In a book about each state's most infamous murders, readers may wonder why attention isn't paid to, say, the Jeffrey Dahmer atrocities in Milwaukee or the Son of Sam serial shootings in New York. The reason is simply that these and other equally sensational stature have been covered to death, so to speak, in books, movies, television, documentaries, and podcasts. Rather than repeat the details of such overly familiar horrors, I have tried to excavate and bring to light several hundred lesser-known, darkly fantasizing cases that, taken together, form a unique criminal history of the United States. End quote. That is spot on. That right away, when you read that, you're like, okay, I know what I'm going to be getting from this book. I know that I'm going to be learning about hundreds of cases that I might not have heard from. I will say there were some of them in here, and I did make note of them as I went through and read the book, of cases that were, I felt, a little bit more on the well-known side, where I was like, okay, that's interesting that Harold put those in there. But it was really just less than a handful of cases. So, and I'll let the reader and you guys know which cases those are. In regards to my state, Massachusetts, I will say I did not know a single one that he referenced. I was waiting to get through to Massachusetts. And then when I got there, I'm like, I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that. And I was taken aback in the best way possible, because that to me really speaks to the type of research and case selection that the author chose to do for this. Maybe some of you reading this, when it gets to your particular state, you might have heard of some of these cases, some you might not have. But either way, I was really pleasantly surprised that I got to learn about cases from my own state that I had not even heard of. So what I'm going to do is, in regards to each letter, the way the book is broken down, I'm going to say the title of the, I don't want to say chapter because there aren't really chapters, the title of the section under each state with the name that he gives. And a lot of the names that he gives to this are the kind of nicknames of the offenders that he's describing. So that if you as a reader or watching this episode and you're like, gee, I wonder what that is, I want to learn a little bit more, then you'll be able to do so. But before I do that, I do see a few of you snuck on in. I want to make sure I say hello. Let's see. Kane, hi, I hope you are doing well. Tony saying, Danny, for the true crime for Friday, I just saw a video clip with blood spots on Nancy Guthrie's porch, sad and scary. Tony Stewart, yeah, I've been following this as most people have. Yeah, it was actually just a side note about that. Yeah, I was at the gym earlier tonight, and yeah, that's like on every single channel right now is kind of talking about that. It's just so horrific. True Crime and Chill will not be Friday night. It will not be Friday night. There was a conflict in my schedule, so it will either be Thursday or Saturday. TBD. I've already spoken to Beckham. He is on board with either nights. I will let you know as soon as possible, but not able to do it Friday. So my apologies for that. So thank you for bringing that up and reminding me. Let's see. I want to make sure. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, K-Dog. Hope you're well. Okay. I mean, always, but in the best way possible. So, okay, let's get to structure first. The book itself is structured extremely organized. To be fair and give credit where credit is due, all of Harold's books are very, very well structured. So the way this is laid out is alphabetically in order by state. And the way, I'll just start with Alabama, for example. The way the sections break down is it gives a picture of the state and then a little bit of a map where each of the cases that he's referencing is. So for those kind of geography interested people, you'll be able to kind of see a little bit of an area of whether these offenders that he's talking about are close together or spread apart within the state, because each of them vary based on the cases that he has selected. The book is completely black and white. There are photos of every single case that he's covering. Some gives just one photo, some gives two, but again, they are all black and white photos. I will say, so the book itself is 208 pages. For the amount of content that's in here, the amount of cases that he covers, the amount of pictures that are in here, it is so condensed, but not in a way that it overwhelms the reader. It is condensed where you are getting, to be perfectly blunt, just like bang for your buck here with this book. Let's see. So depending on where you purchase it from, so $19.99 in the United States or $25.99 Canada. For the amount of cases that is covered in here, honestly, Harold could have charged way more for this book because the reader is getting so much from it. But so I think it's a steal, an absolute steal, that the cost of this book. And typically I never get into costs of book ever. But again, I was very surprised when I purchased it and then, got it and it came in and reading through it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like compared to like some of the costs of other true crime books right now, like this is yeah, you're getting a lot for this. So just wanted to put that out there because, yeah, I don't typically go over that. The better Tony, hello, good to see you. Hope you are well. So the again, the way that it is broken down is into states. So I'm going to read each state, and then the again, some of them have 2, some have 3 different sections within each. So as I'm going through, and I will pause as I do it because I'm going to be throwing a lot of names, kind of nicknames, I should say, at y'all. So, and while I'm doing this, if there's any that you're like, wait a minute, I know who that is, feel free to jump in the chat and be like, I know who that is. Because again, not all of them. Some of them have names. Some of them mostly have nicknames. So let's just jump in. Alabama. The original Sin City, and I'm going to butcher this next word, a recidivist runs rampant, the code blue junkie. Alaska. The Mad Trapper, Hunting Humans, Mountain Man Murderer, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Israel Keys. Arizona, Mobile Home Invasion, The Beauty School Barbarian, The Namesake Ernesto Miranda, Not So Heroic Hogan, The Sleepwalking Defense. Arkansas, The Gallows Trio. This next word, I'm telling you right now, I'm putting in the chat. I don't even know where to begin to pronounce it. I'll try because why not? The Villainous Vet, A Hilltop Hell. California, The Chicken Coop Murders, A Kidnapping Comeuppance, Lethal Enlightening. Femme Fatale, Louise Pete, A Boat Bombing in Newport, The Jesus of Chatsworth. Baby Crazy in Los Angeles, A Very Bad Monday in San Diego, and the Covina Massacre. Colorado, The Beer Scion Disappears in Morrison, Shock Jock Shot in Denver, The Broomfield Teen Who Put a Hit on Herself. Connecticut, A 12-year-old Goes to the Gallows, The Windsor Murder Factory, A Wood Chipping in Newton, Carnage in Cheshire, The Connecticut Cannibal. Delaware, A Fiery Execution in Newcastle, The Jilted Paramour, A Sibling Slaughter. Florida, The Vampire Rapist, A Bully Slayed in Weston, A Child Snatched in Sarasota, The Hammer Boy Strikes, The Zombie. Georgia, Atlanta's Jack the Ripper, Downfall of a King, The Crippler of Fayetteville. Hawaii, The Wahalu, and oh my gosh, I totally mispronounced that. The Wahalo Monster, A Honolulu Serial Killer, Ayoko Shinju in Honolulu. Oh my gosh, I can't even pronounce this one. In the Xerox Massacre. That's a good point to pause right now and get my mind together. Most Canadian killers get slaps on the wrist. James Watson, you are spot on. That is one of the things that I have really come to learn, not so much just through being someone who likes to kind of research and learn about different true crime cases, especially in different countries, but I honestly didn't really know the extent until, oh my gosh, I'm just going to pain me to give Paul credit here. But talking to like Paul and Bilford, just in kind of conversation, as I was especially starting to do the Manson show with Paul, is like, because that's his normal, right? Growing up in Canada. So he's used to the Canadian legal system where I'm very much used to the US legal system. And to hear him kind of talk about it, I'm thinking, no. You hear about a couple of cases here and there, but then for him to kind of break it down a bit more, it was, yeah. So James, you are very much spot on. Very much spot on. I know, and I'm shocked I actually didn't mess that up. I am shocked I pronounced that right. Did I freeze for a second? I did something different with the Wi-Fi, so there should not be any freezing. But if it happens again, please, please, please let me know. Okay. Now let's jump back. So, Idaho, an explosive episode in Caldwell, Fly Pepper Linda, Idaho's Jack the Ripper, Claude Dallas, Idaho Outlaw. Illinois, The Last Train to Wayne, A Chi-Town Love Quadrangle, Chicago's Most Beautiful Murderess, A Pedophile Strikes in Chicago, Carnage in a Cave, A Last Ribe in Urbana, Champaign. Indiana, A Klansman Killer, A Butcher Dies in Yorktown, Principal Redding Goes on a Rampage. Iowa, A Boy Murderer in Clayton Count, The Unsolved Axe Murders of Elissa, Cornfield Killer, and then the Cain and Abel murders to round out Iowa. Kansas, A Kid Killer in Johnson County, A Husky Horror, The Wichita Hotel Sniper, A Bombing in Olathe. Kentucky, A Brother's Vengeance, The 6-Year-Old Slayer, The Last Legal Hanging in Kentucky. Okay, how old are these? K-Dog, that is an excellent question. So they range. Some of them are several hundred years old, and then some of them are more recent. I would say the more recent ones range between like the last 10 to 30 years. I would call those the more recent cases, but some can go back several hundred years. So that's actually an excellent question. I was going to get to that a little bit later, but you beat me to it. Great minds think alike. Let's see. Oh, you're referencing a case in Canada. Okay. A guy in the prairies, Canada, beheaded a fellow passenger and only got like half of a decade in a mental hospital and released. He was found not guilty, but given 9 years in a mental hospital and released. Yeah, that's one of those. And there are some examples in this book of cases where they are found either not guilty by reason of insanity or sent to a mental facility. And then, as we know from that, usually they are released. So we do see some of those cases in this book. So keep that in mind, which I think gives a lot of great variety to the reader of this. They're not just getting a certain type of case. And also, with that being said, in regards to, because just to go back to K-Dog, just to go back to your question, because there are different time periods that this covers, anytime there are death sentences that are carried out, with that being said, it kind of makes sense that there's a variety of different type of death sentence, the way they are executed. So I found that very interesting because not only does that vary over time, but it varies within each state as well. Any in Pennsylvania? There sure are some in Pennsylvania. We are getting there. I don't know if soft is the right word, softer and I wonder how they would phrase it. From a U.S. perspective, I would say they are more, I hate to say lenient. I wonder, I don't know I would love to know, James Watson, if you have the insight into why, and again, that's just your normal, right, of how sentencing is done in another country. But again, from here looking there, I think the first case that comes to mind is like Karla Homolka got the sweetheart deal of a lifetime. But there are so many other cases that we've talked about on this channel where they are from Canada and the sentences that they get are very lenient in comparison to what they would get here. In regards to the why, I don't know if they are more pro rehabilitation, even though the United States claims to be. I don't know. I don't know. Like Boston is soft on true crime. I'll leave that one alone. Beckham in the chat. Every country has, they're totally different. You know what my little kind of like behind the scenes rabbit hole is right now, honestly, Beckham, so that's funny that you mention it, is kind of the UK kind of crimes, court system there. I find that very, very fascinating. For some reason, I don't know why I've been going down that rabbit hole. And that's just like me on the side, nothing to do with this channel. I'm very fascinated with their court of law. So Sam Smith, I did see you sneak in. Good to see you. I hope you are doing well so far this week, hon. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back. So let's see, where were we? Louisiana. So Louisiana, a phenomenally depraved scoundrel. Tony Joe goes to the electric chair. Lucky Willie and gruesome Gertie. Maine, the Purrington family massacre. Brutality in Brunswick. A murderous madwoman. A cook rampage in Newry. Maryland, the not quite perfect crime, the unsolved murder of Sister Kathy. Life imitates art in St. Michael's. Massachusetts, the Boston Belfry Slayer, a miscreant in Yarmouth. Jolly Jane lays waste. The Boston Giggler, another monster in Mystic, and Killer Nanny goes free. So I just want to rewind a second. I mentioned I didn't know any of the ones in Massachusetts. I did know Jolly Jane Topin, which is the Jolly Jane Lays Waste. So when I first was reading through, I was like, wait a minute, I don't know any of those. But it wasn't until I was like halfway through the Jolly Jane when I was like, oh, that's Jane Topin. Okay, I know that one. But the way it was described in here, I was like, oh my God, I don't know any. I didn't know any of the others, though. Did not know any of the others. So I just want to clarify that one. So Michigan, the St. Aubin Avenue Massacre, and I'm totally going to mispronounce this, so let me put it in the chat. And I'm sure I'm mispronouncing a lot of these from the various states. So my apologies if anybody's listening to this and you're from that state and you're like, Danny, you totally messed that up. My sincerest apologies. So the Ypsilanti Ripper, Master Bob, and Grosse Point. Minnesota's is the Minneapolis, again, another one. Savalanche, a hitman hired in St. Paul, the wannabe vampire of St. Cloud, and Versace killer starts his spree. Mississippi, where murdered December 17th, 1880. The Legs murder, socialite killed by same. The devil himself did it. Missouri, Stack Lee becomes legend. The original Frankie and Johnny. The Union Station massacre. The hitchhiking killer. Gypsy Rose gets her revenge. And I already know all of you watching are like, Gypsy Rose, that's a well-known case. So we're just going to address that right now. Yes, that is a very well-known case. So that's one of the ones where I said, like, unless on one hand, there are some names that I think a lot of people would know, that is one of them. So Montana, a loner killer in Gallatin. The Missoula Mauler, a marriage gone bad in Glacier. Nebraska, the Nebraska Fiend, a guilty killer confesses. A judge gunned down in Lincoln, the maniac sniper of Omaha. Nevada, murder of the Comstock Queen, a forensic first, Loveless in Elko. New Hampshire, a grim memorial in Pembroke, an obsession turns deadly. The Bear Brook murders, student killers in Etna. New Jersey, A Telltale Heart in New Brunswick, The Torch Slayer Strikes, A Murderous Minister, The Tragedy Behind Megan's Law, A Killer Nurse in New Jersey. Quick pause there. See where you guys are. I was in jail with a guy. Interesting, Tony. And I'm sure you, at the very least, know how to pronounce that like way better than I do. Oh my God, Beckham, you're wild. All right. New Mexico. The Headless Man of Taos, Alien Killers in Albuquerque, An Abused Teen Snaps in Roswell. Hey, KK. Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. New York. The Female Jack the Ripper, A Historic Execution, A Child Jekyll and Hyde in Troy, The First Woman in the Electric Chair, The Phantom Murderer, A Parrot Drops a Dime in New York City, a New York Post headline says it all. North Carolina, A Reverend in Name Only, A Family Annihilator in Winston-Salem, The Lynch Killings, A Superstar's Father is Killed, A Wide Receiver Takes a Bad Route. North Dakota, A Murdering Eccentric in Niagara, A Cattle Dispute Turns Murderous in Turtle Lake, A Clown, a Hunter, and a Lion Walk into a Bar. Ohio, The Tanyard Murder, The Olympian Killer, The Inwood Park Horror, A Notorious Killer and His First Victim, A Butcher in Brookfield. Oklahoma, A Shootout in Sapulpa? I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. There are so many of these that I'm just like, ugh, I'm trying my best. All right, back to Oklahoma. French Fries in McAllister, The Oklahoma Girl Scout Murders, Sirloin Stockade Massacre, Going Postal in Edmond. Oregon, The Violent Life of Michelle D. Gates, A Monster Mom in Springfield, A Mystery Writer Doesn't Get Away with Murder. Pennsylvania. All right, Kane, we got to Pennsylvania. The Girl Torturer of York, The York Witchcraft Murder, The Poison Ring, The Babes in the Wood Tragedy, An Amish Man Unhinged. Rhode Island, A Minister Goes Free in Tiverto, A Murder Fantasy Made Real, The Warwick Slasher, A Sex Worker Serial Killer in Woonsocket. South Carolina, The Last Hanging in Charleston, Last Wills and Testaments, The Eye Drop Killer. South Dakota, A Union Disintegrates in Sioux Falls, The Human Monster, A Recidivist Meets His End in Spearfish, The Duct Tape Killer of Sioux Falls. Tennessee, The Night Marauder, String Bean Shot Dead in Gouletsville, The Soul Sucker. Texas, Alligator Joe of Elmendorf, The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, The Not Beatnik Killers, The Candyman of Deer Park, A Misogynist Turns Murderous in Killeen, The Eyeball Killer. Utah, A Crack Shot in Bingham, A Soldier Snaps in Salina, A Killer's Last Laugh, The Ogden Horror, A Forger Turned Bomber in Salt Lake. We're getting to the end, folks. Vermont, Mother-in-Law Murdered in Williston, The Monster from Duxbury, The Meanest Man in a Pretty Town, An Innocent Man Goes Free in West Dover. Virginia, A Wife Killer from Richmond, The Virginia Court Massacre, Life Imitates Art. Oh my gosh, I can't even say it. And this is an easy one. Life Imitates Art in Norfolk, The Hampton Roads Killer. What is James spouting right here? If I was going to be a serial killer, I'd either be the girl take color or the crazy blue killer. James, you just have the highest aspirations. I really commend you. Aim for the stars, really. Hey, Wolf. Good to see you. You just missed Virginia. You just missed it. Go back like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. So let's round this up. Washington. The fast fiend of Starvation Heights. A midlife obsession ends badly in Puyallup. The Wahi Massacre. The Bellevue Thrill Killers. West Virginia. Testimony from the Beyond. An unexplained familicide. A folie d'oeil in Star City. Wisconsin. An infamous hanging in Kenosha. Massacre at the Bungalow of Love. The Wisconsin Ghoul. A congregant snaps in Brooklyn. Wyoming. Governor Skidshoes. Wyoming's Death Rider. Tarzan of the Tetons. A comeuppance in Cheyenne. All right. So those are all the different sections within each state. I just threw a lot at you. As you notice, some of them had names of either the victim or the offender. Most of them had nicknames or some type of statement alluding to either the place or the type of crime that was committed. And you'll notice when you read each part of the sections that I said, the title, if it doesn't necessarily have the name in it of the offender or the victim, there's something within the headlines or the description of what happened that ties back and then kind of loops it into the reader. We're like, okay, the title of that section makes sense, and here's why that is. Now, of course, I will not go through each of the 50 states because that would just be way too time consuming. But I did make note of a few of the different either sections or states that stood out to me and why. Again, there were some of the cases that I was already familiar with in this book. So when I was able to kind of read through those, even though I was already quite familiar with those, it gave me good insight into like, okay, if I as a reader was not aware of this case, how would I kind of take that and be able to go forward? And I will say, Harold crams a lot about each of these cases into just a little bit of page information. So again, the reader gets a lot for each of these. So again, what stood out to me is the Very Bad Monday in San Diego. So right away when I saw that title, I was like, I know exactly who that is. That is Brenda Spencer. I have covered that. There was a book review that I did on this channel probably like 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years ago at this point. A really great book on that by Emily Hunt, he was also been on the show for a different book that he put out. So check out that book review if you are not familiar with that case. Again, where I was already familiar with that in here, I was like, okay, that's great. Someone I already know. In regards to Georgia, in regards to the title, at first I was like, I think I know who this is going to be. The Crippler of Fayetteville. So that was Chris Benoit. That was a case that I covered on here way back in the beginning of Danny After Dark, like back in the pre-filmed bathrobe, like silk robe days of Danny After Dark. And I was a huge wrestling fan growing up. So I remember when that happened, Chris Benoit, murdered his family and then committed suicide. I remembered that. So to kind of have that come across in here, I was like, oh, okay. And that's one where I'm honestly like, I wonder if like obviously people to that area would know that case, but it was very big in the wrestling world. I can't remember like if it really crossed into like a lot of the like general true crime news. Because the true crime community is so different than it was back then. I can't remember. But to see that in there, I was like, okay. In regards to Massachusetts, again, I did not know any of these cases except for it was like halfway through when I was reading the Jolly Jane one, when I was like, oh, okay, Jane Tobin. So when I got to there, I was like, oh, okay, I know that case. But other than that, didn't know the rest of them. Let's see. Charles Stewart, however, that one, another monster in the Mystic. So that one, so I did cover that way, way back as well on Danny After Dark, except when I saw the title, I was like, A Monster in the Mystic. What the heck is that? And it wasn't until I started reading it and I was like, oh, okay, I do know that one. And the way the titles are, I should have been able to put 2 and 2 together when I was like reading through the headlines of it, but didn't know that one until I was like halfway through it. In those range, just to give a little bit of perspective in time, 1989, the other Massachusetts ones, 1997, 1901, 1899, 1875. So there's, again, a several 100-year kind of coverage just on the state of Massachusetts alone, which I thought was very cool for the reader. Missouri, of course, the one that stood out to me right away was Gypsy Rose Gets Her Revenge. So that one right away in the title, you're like, okay, everybody knows that case for the most part. New Jersey, A Killer Nurse in New Jersey, Charles Cullen. I covered that way back as well. So right away, I was like, oh, okay. When it said Killer Nurse in Jersey, I'm like, okay, I think that's Cullen. And then once I got to that chapter, I was like, all right, yes, that is him. One that kind of stood out to me because I had not heard about this case, but it reminded me so much of a different one. Also a book that Harold Schechter wrote was in New Mexico. So that case that I'm referring to it talks about the headless man in Taos. So Arthur Rochford Manby. So I didn't know this case at all, but when I was reading through it, I was like, that sounds so similar to Belle Gunness. So if you are familiar with the Belle Gunness case and you're going to be looking up the Arthur Rochford Manby one, then you're like, okay, I see where Danny's going with this in regards to maybe where she's making that connection of similarity there. But yeah, I was very like, okay, this sounds just like the ending of another case that he covered. Ohio. So I will say this was one of the ones that I was shocked that Harold put this one in particular in his book because full disclosure, I felt it contradicted a little bit of the introduction, but just this one because of who it is. So let me go back to the introduction here. So he says in here, in a book about each state's most infamous murders, readers may wonder why isn't attention being paid to, say, the Jeffrey Dahmer atrocities in Milwaukee. So that's one of the things Harold says right at the beginning of the book. But when we get to Ohio, and yes, it's in a different state, but still, he talks about Jeffrey Dahmer. He talks about Jeffrey Dahmer in Ohio, and the title of that section is called A Notorious Killer and His First Victim. And as we know, Jeffrey Dahmer's first victim was Stephen Hicks, and that was June 18th, 1989. I don't understand why this one case, and yes, it is the first victim of Jeffrey Dahmer, and it wasn't in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, like the rest of his crimes were. But I was very, very surprised where I'm like, wait a minute, why am I reading about Jeffrey Dahmer in here? Didn't Harold at the beginning of the book say we weren't going to be discussing that? It particularly said Jeffrey Dahmer. So that's my only one critique, like negative critique, if you will. I didn't mind, but I was just like, wait a minute, it just seems to contradict what the author's setting out for what he says he's going to do. So I can't imagine that then again, there might be somebody who isn't familiar with Jeffrey Dahmer and what he's done. So to them, Stephen Hicks might be a newer case that they don't know of. And then what leads ultimately Jeffrey Dahmer to go down the road that he does. Again, maybe someone is not familiar with him or his crimes, and to them that is new, but I still can't get over that at the beginning of the introduction, Harold kind of specifically makes the point to say, like, won't be discussing that, but then does. So only negative critique. So Oregon, a monster mom in Springfield. That was the case of Diane Downs back on May 19th, 1983. To me, that's also a bit of a more well-known case. I did cover Diane Downs way back on this as well. So again, just a few of the names that I was kind of surprised. Like, oh, to me, those are more well-known cases. But then again, most people might not know them. But again, the Jeffrey Dahmer one for me, like that one, I have like in all bold caps, like, wait, what? I didn't think the author was going to be describing that, but does. Let me see, the Wami massacre, that was in Washington. That one I'd already known as well, but I only knew like the basics of that. I covered that again way back, but it's been so long and that one's so detailed that by the time I got back to reading this, I just remembered like the basics of it. So I was like, okay, yes, that's right. Other than that, those are kind of the only ones that really kind of stick out to me, besides the kind of overall thing that the reader gets in regards to, again, the overall time period that's being covered here of hundreds of years of cases and different types of when someone was sentenced to death and that death penalty execution was carried out, which it was carried out in quite a bit of these, I'm not going to lie. Seeing the variety of the different types of executions that occur. I found that absolutely fascinating to read, again, not only on a time frame level, but a state by state level. And there were, and I won't say which ones, there were some death penalty sentences and executions that happened that went wrong. And that is talked about in here. Like very quickly, the author gives a little bit, but I was just like, oh, it got botched. And it describes that. And to me, those things were very fascinating because you don't really hear about that very often. And again, with the amount of information that the author gives for each state and each section, I was blown away by how much that even those types of details, it could have just stopped at, for example, John Smith was then executed for his crimes on such and such a date. But no, some of them goes a little bit further than that, which I found just absolutely fascinating to, like, when there was those details that were so important to the case that the author makes sure to get those couple extra sentences in there. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you guys. Again, this is a very different type of book. It's hard to do like the traditional type of book review that I normally do on this channel. Again, my apologies in regards to each state when I broke it down if I mispronounced any cities or names or whatnot. But I think this gives the reader the overall gist. And if this is something that you are into true crime and you want to, maybe not necessarily dive into a book just on one subject, but you want to learn a little bit about a lot of different cases. And then if any interest you from there, go down those further. This is the book to do so. Again, it covers 50 states. As I read from each of these, you can see where there were some states where maybe Harold only talks about one, 2 or 3 cases. And then some of them where there's like maybe 7 or 8 that he talks about. So a lot to learn in here. Some you may know, a lot of them you may not. I would say, again, there was a bunch that I knew or had briefly heard of, but boast, I had not. But even within my own state. So I thought that was very, very cool. So any last minute comments or questions on this book? Again, if you have read it or if you know of any of the cases that I just said, by all means, please leave a comment. Say, I'm familiar with that one, or that one happened in my, my home state and whatnot. Because there's just so many that are discussed here. Yeah, you guys are talking. Yeah, Gypsy Rose. Yeah, she's on social media. So very, very interesting, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's interesting when, not just Gypsy Rose, but even, Casey Anthony being on social media as well. It's very interesting to see, I think, that side of it because it's so new. And I'm referring more so to TikTok, where Gypsy Rose is and Casey Anthony. It's so different than what we're used to. Usually when I want to be creeped out, I just watch Old Danny After Dark videos. Oh my gosh, the backgrounds, the lighting, yeah. Oh my God. Complete overhaul. What's the murder rate in Antarctica? Good question. If you or anybody else knows that answer, by all means. By all means. Okay. Yeah, either Thursday or Saturday. Where tomorrow is Wednesday, I will know for sure very, very soon. But Beckham is on board, not to say he'll be there on time, but Beckham is on board to be there as well. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode of Danny After Dark. And again, for this very different type of book review for Harold Schechter's latest book, 50 States of Murder, an Atlas of American Crime. Again, I recommend this to everyone. It is an easy read, especially within each state or within each, section within each state. The reader can very easily pick this up and put it back down at any point and be able to absorb and get a lot of information about a lot of different cases. So very cool. And again, y'all know Harold Schechter. I have been a fan of his books for decades. So anytime Harold Schechter comes out with a new book, I am all about it. And it pains me to have had that one negative just kind of confusion as a reader in regards to Jeffrey Dahmer being in this book. It pained me. It pains me, but you got to keep it real. And yeah, if that's the only negative thing I felt in this book, then he did a great job. So, all right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great rest of your week. And I will put up the event for the True Crime and Chill as soon as I finalize that with Beckham. So see you soon, everyone. And remember, until next time, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.